Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and Superman's most important Easter egg was the mural art that James Gunn snuck into the background of the Hall of Justice that he said detailed the history of the DC universe on Earth. And I promised that I would break this down once James Gunn released the full images like he said he would, and hot damn, he did just that on Friday. Sorry, it took me the weekend to get to this. I've been at San Diego Comic-Con where I learned some further context about the DCU from James Gunn's Peacemaker panel. So in this video, I'm going to explain who all these heroes are to understand the broader history of James Gunn's DCU that is about to be a very important part of our nerd lives. And it's not just a list of character names, it's really just like the context of what this mural is and what it means to the characters in this movie in particular. And please consider supporting New Rockstars by checking out our merch store, nerdriot.shop, where we have some cool Superman inspired designs like this Doghouse of Solitude shirt. Okay, so this mural has two parts which adorn the two sides of the Hall of Justice. In the film, the hall is still under construction by Maxwell Lord, who runs the Justice Gang. The mural covers a real-life mural in Cincinnati's Union Terminal, where this scene was shot because originally the whole Hall of Justice design was based on the structure. The real mural shows the history of the city and a kind of Pawnee, Indiana from Parks and Rec style mural, and that totally inspired Gunn to pick the heroes that he did for this mural. In general, the heroes we see represent a broad range of time periods throughout the history of the DC universe, but we assumed a lot of them would be representing the Golden Age, the original Justice Society from the 1940s and 1950s, when the DC pantheon of characters was really populated. However, I was definitely inaccurate in some of my initial assumptions that I made in my initial Easter egg breakdown. Specifically, James Gunn did not include any older eras of The Flash, Aquaman, or Wonder Woman because he wants to establish those characters as modern day superheroes, though technically Diana and Arthur would be old enough to have existed in this past era. He just didn't want to lock any important characters down. And also, he wanted to use this mural to make an interesting statement that I'll get to at the end of this video. We know that James Gunn has a Wonder Woman script from Supergirl writer Anna Nogueira that is being fast-tracked that he feels very confident in, and I just don't think he wants this mural to box in that story in any way. The Flash and Aquaman, meanwhile, James Gunn has said will not have any movies developed for them in the next 2 years. So let's start on the left side. Starting from the left, that is Sister Symmetry. This is specifically the Nimue Nwudu. She's a powerful sorceress and a founding member of the Justice League Dark, and she's gone by names such as Sister Symmetry, also Madame Xanadu. Justice League Dark was a branch of the JLA who dealt with supernatural threats. She's similar to Dr. Fate in a way because she wears the cloak of Syra, and Syra is an entity called a Lord of Order, similar to Nabu for Dr. Fate. Next is Silent Knight, aka Brian Kent, one of the few that I did get correct before. He's from the 6th century, and it was later established that he was actually one of the past lives of Hawkman Carter Hall. Next, this is Exoristos. She's an exiled Amazonian from Themyscira who wanders the earth for thousands of years, introduced in Demon Knights #1 in 2011. Yeah, not all of these characters were introduced in the Golden Age, therefore, but at this part of the mural, they're all ones who were implied to have been around for many years. Exoristos, though, is an interesting inclusion because this makes 2 exiled Themyscirans after Cersei in the DCU, and I wonder if we're gonna get their story in Anna Nogueira's Wonder Woman movie. Next is Black Pirate, aka John Valor, from Action Comics #23 in 1940. He was a 16th century English privateer slash pirate who was captured and hanged in a port town that would later become Opal City, cursing this city and living on as a restless spirit. Next is Miss Liberty, aka Bess Lynn, introduced in 1962, but she was a Revolutionary War hero from 1776, involved in a plot with the Liberty Bell, who is actually believed to be an ancestor of World War II hero Liberty Bell, who appears on the other side of the mural. Next is, I think, my favorite part of this mural. I thought this was Flash, but it is not. This is Whip Whirlwind. That's a 19th century alias of Max Mercury, and I love this because on the other side of the mural, we see the Maxwell Kandrel era of Max Mercury. Max Mercury is like a speedster who's kind of in the orbit of the Flash character, but he's a guy who tries to join the Speed Force but is always unable to because he sucks, and he's like constantly stumbling, and he ends up in different time periods. Like he's originally from the 1700s, but he has popped up in the 1860s, in the 1910s, in the 1940s, and then the 1980s. Comic writer Mark Waid ended up retconning and combining some of the existing characters to make them all this one up speedster. I just love that James Gunn put different eras of him on both sides of the mural. Like on the left, he's readying into a sprint, and then on the right, he's dashing across, because it suggests that this guy interacted with all of these heroes in whatever era of time they existed. Or it could also be a reflection of whoever commissioned this mural in this universe. Maxwell Lord might have been confused as to whether they were the same guy or different speedsters in time. Either way, it's very fun and very hilarious. Before we continue with today's video, we wanted to take a quick moment to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. To be real with you all for a second, making YouTube videos for a living weighs on me more heavily than I can really handle a lot of the time. Unlike a lot of jobs out there, my good days and my bad days are worn on my face. They're heard in my voice. They are unable to hide from the world. I cannot have an off day. I feel all kinds of anxiety over whether or not I'm working hard enough, or if I'm covering the news fast enough, or if I'm missing things or getting things wrong in my videos, or if I'm doing all of this in a way that burns out my coworkers or contributes to the overall erosion of public discourse, or if I'm just not hiding all of this well enough behind a perfect enough face on this channel to get this company the esteem and respect that I know it deserves, but I feel often inadequate in delivering. Or, maybe I'm just worried about all this stuff too much that when I go home to my wife and son, I'm just bringing them a broken husband and a broken father. Whew, so obviously I'm working through a lot whenever you see this face, and I wouldn't be able to get through any of these days without therapy. Therapy can help you figure out exactly what's draining your energy, teach you to set boundaries, even with the fun stuff that you may be enjoying in these summer months, just to give you some practical tools to help you actually enjoy these moments instead of just pushing through them. BetterHelp makes getting started with therapy super easy. You just fill out a quick questionnaire and they match you with a licensed therapist in as little as a few days. And if it doesn't feel like the right fit, you can switch therapists at any time for no extra cost. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can actually trust to support you wherever you are, whether you're traveling all summer or staying busy at home or just trying to get through a workday being the best version of you. So if you're finding yourself empty, even during the most exciting summer moments, or if you just need help checking in with yourself, this is your sign to take a step back and really focus on you. Take this summer as an opportunity to reset, recharge, and start prioritizing your mental health, because you deserve to actually enjoy this season, not just get through it. Head to betterhelp.com/newrockstars or click the link in the description to get 10% off your first month and start taking care of your mental health today. Next, we see Super Chief, aka Flying Stag, who was an Iroquois warrior from pre-Columbian America empowered by the Manitou Stone, which was an amulet formed by a meteor. Next, we see El Diablo, aka Lazarus Lane. He was a masked avenger from the Old West in the 19th century. This mural includes bolts of lightning over Super Chief, El Diablo, and the guy to the right, for a fun reason I'll get to in a second. But in the case of El Diablo, it was a bolt of lightning that hit Lazarus Lane in the chest that put him in a coma until an Apache friend named Wise Owl helped revive him. That's kind of why he's called Lazarus Lane, because he resurrects. Bring us to another really fun pull by James Gunn, Hugo Danner. So Hugo Danner was actually a rumored inspiration to Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel for the Superman character. He was a superpowered strongman from Philip Wiley's 1930 novel called Gladiator, but Hugo Danner later had a brief appearance in DC Comics in Young All-Stars in the late 80s. He died at the end of the book Gladiator by getting struck by lightning, thus the lightning behind him. Next is Ghost of Flanders, aka Rip Graves, a World War II superhero who was supposedly someone who had died during the Battle of Marne in the First World War, but he excavated a base beneath the tomb of the unknown soldier, and he uses a red poppy as his trademark to commemorate the Second Battle of Ypres on Flanders Fields, and you can see the tomb of the unknown soldier behind him, and also some World War I biplanes overhead. Next, Sandman, aka Wesley Dodds. This is the first version of the DC Sandman introduced in the Golden Age, when he was wearing a green business suit, the fedora, and the World War I gas mask. This Sandman used a gun emitting a sleeping gas to sedate criminals. This would be before Neil Gaiman's version of Sandman that you might know better. Then Amazing Man, aka Will Everett. He was an Olympian from the 1936 games in Berlin turned janitor who ends up getting hit by an explosion from a criminal named Ultra Humanite, and he gains the power to copy the properties of whatever he touches. Like if you were to touch steel, he would become steel. His grandsons end up later taking on the name as well. So literally we are seeing a progression of time from several thousands and hundreds of years in the past to where we are now, from World War I going into the time between the world wars, which brings us now to the furthest on the side over here, Zatara the Magician, aka Giovanni Zatara. He's on the very far right because he showed up all the way back in Action Comics #1 in 1938. Yeah, the very first Superman comic book, making him one of DC's oldest characters. He's a reported descendant of Leonardo da Vinci. He's a stage magician who gains the ability to use real magic. So now we move on to the other side. So we're going from left to right, and now we're moving moving closer to the modern era. On the far left of this side is who we mentioned before, Liberty Bell, aka Libby Lawrence, who's a World War II era superhero whose powers would activate when a museum watchman named Paul Revere would ding the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, and that would activate her powers. She would be a founding member and a chairwoman of All-Star Squadron, and dashing past her, again, that's Max Mercury, the Maxwell Candrel era from the 1940s, whom I mentioned earlier, and then gracefully flying on either side of him with a World War II battleship behind them and some World War II bombers overhead, that's Bullet Man, Jim Barr, and his girlfriend Bullet Girl, Susan Kent. They were from the Fawcett Comics 40s era along with the Captain Marvel family. They wear bullet-shaped gravity regulator helmets that allow them to fly and deflect bullets. Then to the right is another duo, TNT, who is the chemistry teacher named Thomas N, or Tex Thomas, and his student Daniel Dunbar, aka Dan the Dynamite. They were from the early 40s as well. They get charged with atomic energy, Thomas with positive energy, Dan with negative energy. Thomas makes rings to keep the energy dormant until the rings touch, at which point their powers activate. TNT generates heat, Dan generates electricity. To the right of them is Phantom Lady, aka Sandra Knight. She uses a black light projector to make herself invisible. Her skimpy costume was later explained to be a deliberate tactic to distract the men she was fighting. Behind her is the US Capitol building because she was a daughter of a US senator. Then, maybe the craziest one of these, Atomic Knight, aka Gardner Grail. So the ruined city behind him is a reference to the Atomic Knights actually coming from the 60s Strange Adventure comics, where they projected into the future there would be a hydrogen war of 1986. Again, this was written in the 60s, so they were like 26 years in the future, everything's gonna die. Some kind of hydrogen war devastated the country, and then there's a tyrant named the Black Baron who rules the Midwestern United States, or the ruins of it. So that guy's opposed by this guy, Gardner Grail, Atomic Knight, and his other Atomic Knights. He wears energy resistant armor. Now, for this to have actually happened in the 60s or the 80s of the DCU is just so wild to consider. Now, Gunn has said that there's no New York City in his fictional DCU, so maybe some of these American cities got nukes, or maybe there's some fictional country or some place in the DCU that suffered some devastating nuclear attack or some nuclear incident and that had to get quarantined off. I have asked James Gunn about this on Threads. I am awaiting his reply. Now, next is Freedom Beast, aka Dominic Madawe. He's an activist who fought apartheid in South Africa. He drinks an elixir that gives him powers, and he wears an ancient helmet that allows him to communicate with animals and merge them to form chimeras. That could be why we see the leopard, or I assume it's a cheetah, in front of him. If you watch Titans on HBO, this character was actually played by Nyambi Nyambi. Then Wildcat, aka Ted Grant. This is another one of the few that I got correct before. He's a longtime member of the Justice Society of America with a longevity that's been justified as coming from a magic spell that gives him 9 lives, aka the cat, part of his moniker. He is a boxer, that's the boxing ring behind him and the punching bag that he's currently hitting. Then, I love this guy, Vibe, aka Paco Ramon. I definitely got this guy wrong before, but this is actually Vibe, who's an 80s breakdancer from Detroit who can project some sonic shockwaves from his dancing. He would also become part of the new JLA. Then, Gunfire, aka Andrew Van Horn. Now we're in the early 90s, which is the unfortunate era I had to grow up with when every comic book cover, it seemed, had like heavy tech armor and lasers from Rob Liefeld characters like Cable and Bishop. Gunfire was the DC version of this, an anti-terrorist operative who, in the Bloodlines crossover, gets attacked by an alien parasite named Venev that gives him the ability to manipulate kinetic energy, so he can charge any object via touch, causing it to emit energy and acts like a gun before it disintegrates. I mean, isn't that classic early 90s? This guy could touch anything and becomes a laser gun. Pew, 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 cool, cool. Pouches, big muscles everywhere. And then lastly, on the far right, many of us had thought this was Dr. Fate, but it is not. This is actually just Maxwell Lord himself, played by James Gunn's brother Sean Gunn in the Superman film and in Peacemaker Season 2. We know it's him because he's standing in front of the Lord Tech Tower of Metropolis. That's the building where Superman saved the employees from the kaiju. Maxwell Lord is not himself a superhero, but it makes sense that because he assembled the Justice Gang and is sponsoring it and is funding the construction or maybe the restoration of the Hall of Justice, his ego is big enough to insert himself in the history of superheroes in the DC universe. So when the Superman film opens by saying that metahumans have been known to the public in the DCU for 300 years, these heroes are what he is referring to. Many of the fighters on this mural are heroes who would have a public reputation from legend or from wartime heroics that would be documented in propaganda and news. Wildcat, Vibe, and Gunfire, meanwhile, are just particularly oddball picks by James Gunn that I really love because it suggests that it's gonna be a while before characters like this appear in live action. I think he wanted to pay pay tribute to these flashy names who are part of this history without having to commit to establishing any lore about characters that we would be seeing soon in live action. But again, knowing that Maxwell Lord commissioned this, it's also kind of a reflection of the heroes he thinks are cool or sexy or woke or whatever. And I think that's what's funniest about this, because yes, it tells us a lot about the DCU history that did actually happen in this universe, but it's also just a really fun piece of character development. Comment down below with your thoughts on this, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Paulo Bianca, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.